The sun was starting its descent over the streets of Seattle, painting the sky with streaks of gold and amber. Michael Hayes was on his way home after a long day at the law firm. His coupe hummed softly as he adjusted the air conditioning, eager to shake off the day's stress. The radio played faintly in the background, a soothing antidote to the bustling city streets. He approached a yellow light, slowing down just as it turned red. That's when the blue and red lights erupted behind him, accompanied by the sharp blare of a police siren. Michael glanced in his rearview mirror, his brows furrowing slightly. He pulled over to the side of the road, rolling down his window as a police cruiser parked behind him. Out stepped Officer Daniel Reed, over 32 years old, with a buzz cut and a badge gleaming on his chest. Reed adjusted his belt as he swaggered toward Michael's car, exuding the confidence of someone used to being in control. The officer's eyes flicked over the coupe, lingering on the sleek exterior as if it confirmed some unspoken assumption. "Nice car," he said, his tone dripping with insinuation. "Must have cost a pretty penny. You come by it honestly?" Michael's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. "It's paid for, officer. Hard work and long hours. Anything else I can help you with?" Reed's smirk widened, sensing a challenge. "Oh, we're just getting started. Let's see how cooperative you really are." "License and registration," Reed said curtly, his voice flat but laced with a hint of authority. Michael complied without a word, reaching into his glove compartment for his registration and handing over his driver's license. His movements were deliberate and calm, but he could feel Reed's gaze scrutinizing him, as if searching for a reason to dig deeper. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Reed asked, leaning closer to the window. "I'm not entirely sure," Michael replied evenly, his tone polite but firm. "You didn't come to a full stop at the light," Reed said, though there was a flicker of hesitation in his voice. Michael frowned but nodded slightly. I thought I slowed down in time, but I understand." "Understand?" Reed scoffed, his voice taking on a mocking edge. "You think you can just nod and make this go away? I've seen guys like you before. Fancy suits, fancy cars, thinking you're above the law." Michael's eyes narrowed slightly, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm not above anything, officer. I'm just trying to get home. If I made a mistake, I'm happy to take the ticket and move on." Reed's lips curled into a sneer. "Oh, you're happy to take a ticket? That's real noble of you. But I'm not here to hand out tickets to guys who think they can talk their way out of trouble." Reed didn't respond immediately. Instead, he lingered, his eyes narrowing as he studied Michael more closely. It wasn't just a routine stop anymore, at least not for Reed. His posture shifted subtly but noticeably, as if he had already decided this was more than a minor infraction. The officer glanced at the license in his hand. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked. Michael hesitated for a fraction of a second before replying, "I moved here a few months ago. My address is on the license." But Reed wasn't really listening. His questions were starting to take on an edge, just enough to suggest that he wasn't concerned about a traffic violation anymore. Michael's calm demeanor seemed to irk him, and he leaned in closer. "Where were you headed in such a hurry?" "Just going home," Michael replied. His tone remained steady, but the subtle shift in the air was impossible to ignore. Reed didn't just see Michael as a driver anymore. He saw something else, something that warranted suspicion. Michael could sense the tension building, but he didn't flinch. Little did Officer Reed know, the calm exterior wasn't naivety, it was control. This was just the beginning. "Homer," Reed said, his voice laced with skepticism, "you sure you weren't running from something? Guys like you always have a story. Let's hear the real one." Michael's grip on the steering wheel tightened, but he kept his tone even. "The real story is, I'm tired. It's been a long day, and I'd like to get back to my family. That's all you need to know, officer." Reed chuckled darkly. "Family, man, that's cute, but I've got a job to do, and I don't trust guys who think they can charm their way out of a stop." Reed took a step back, folding Michael's documents with an exaggerated slowness before tucking them into his chest pocket. He straightened up, his expression shifting into something faintly smug, as though he'd already made up his mind about the man sitting in front of him. "Step out of the car for me," Reed ordered. Michael's grip on the steering wheel tightened briefly, but his face betrayed no reaction. "Is there a specific reason for that, officer?" he asked, his tone measured. Reed's lips twitched, but he masked it quickly. "I asked you to step out of the car. You don't want to make this harder than it has to be." The threat hung in the air, unspoken, yet unmistakable. "Harder," Michael repeated, his voice calm but pointed. "I've been nothing but compliant, officer. If you've got a reason to escalate this, I'd like to hear it. Or is this just a power trip?" Reed's eyes flashed with anger. "You're real mouthy for someone in your position. Keep talking and you'll see how hard this can get." Michael exhaled slowly and opened the door. As he stepped out, Reed's eyes flicked over him, sizing him up. Michael stood a little taller than the officer, his shoulders broad but his demeanor unthreatening. His tailored suit suggested professionalism, his polished shoes hinted at someone meticulous and careful. Yet none of that seemed to matter. Reed gestured toward the front of the car. "Hands where I can see them." Michael complied, his movements calm and deliberate. "Is there something specific you're looking for, officer?" Reed smirked faintly. "Just routine. We've had some incidents around here. You can never be too careful." Michael turned his head slightly, locking eyes with Reed. "Incidents involving men in business suits driving coups? Or does this have more to do with something else?" The question landed like a punch, and for a moment Reed's composure faltered. He straightened up, his hand drifting toward his belt, more reflex than necessity. "Watch your tone," he said, his voice hardening. "I'm simply asking a question," Michael replied. There was no defiance in his voice, just a quiet firmness that seemed to unsettle the officer. "You're asking too many questions," Reed snapped. "You think you're some kind of lawyer, don't you? I've dealt with your type before, always trying to twist things around." Michael's lips twitched, but he held back a smile. "If I were a lawyer, officer, you'd be in a lot more trouble than you are right now." Reed leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "You seem awfully familiar with how this works. You got something to hide?" Michael let the silence stretch for a beat before answering. "No, officer. I just believe in being clear about the reasons for an interaction like this. Transparency, you know." Reed scoffed, but didn't reply. He stepped back, pacing a small circle in front of the car. The dynamic was shifting in ways he couldn't quite grasp. Michael wasn't reacting the way most people would. There was no fear, no stammering, no nervous fidgeting. Instead, there was control, poise, and an unsettling calm that put Reed on edge. "You seem pretty confident," Reed muttered, almost to himself, "like you think you know what's going to happen next." Michael didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he tilted his head slightly. "Confidence isn't the issue here, officer. Respect is." Reed froze for half a second before turning back to face him. The smirk was gone now, replaced by something sharper, almost defensive. He opened his mouth to reply, but the words didn't come out. Michael's composure was throwing him off balance, and he didn't like it. As the silence stretched, the tension between them felt electric, and Reed was starting to realize this wasn't going to play out the way he'd expected. "Respect?" Reed spat, his voice rising. "You think you deserve respect just because you got a fancy car and a suit? I'm the one with the badge here, not you." Michael's eyes didn't waver. "A badge doesn't earn respect, officer. Your actions do, and so far you're not making a great case for yourself." But instead of backing down, Reed doubled down. The real test was about to begin. Reed tapped his fingers against the holster on his belt, his frustration barely concealed. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who looked like Michael. His gaze flicked back to the coupe, as though searching for a justification he hadn't yet manufactured. "Turn around and place your hands on the hood," Reed said, his voice clipped. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Weapons?" he repeated, his tone incredulous but still measured. "Do I look like someone who's carrying a weapon?" Reed's jaw tightened, and for a moment his composure cracked. "I'm not going to ask you again." "And I'm not refusing," Michael said, his voice low but firm. "But I'm also not going to let you treat me like a criminal without cause. You want me to comply, give me a reason that holds up." Reed's face reddened. "You're pushing your luck, pal. One more word and I'll have you in cuffs." Michael hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable passing across his face. Then, without a word, he turned and placed his palms flat against the hood of his car. Reed approached, the crunch of his boots on the asphalt breaking the uneasy silence. The officer patted Michael down in quick, rough movements, his hands lingering a little longer than necessary. It wasn't just a search, it was an attempt to assert dominance, to provoke a reaction. But Michael didn't flinch, didn't stiffen, didn't so much shift under the invasive scrutiny. "You're clean," Reed muttered, stepping back. The admission sounded begrudging, like he was irritated that he hadn't found anything to justify his suspicion. Michael turned to face him, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "Of course I am," he said simply. "Now, officer, if you're done—" "And I'm not done," Reed interrupted, his voice rising slightly. The words tumbled out too quickly, betraying his need to stay in control. "You seem to know a lot about what I can and can't do. Care to explain why?" Michael folded his arms, his posture relaxed despite the tension crackling between them. "I've had my fair share of interactions with law enforcement," he said. "Let's just say I've learned a lot over the years." Reed's eyes narrowed. "That's so? You a lawyer or something?" Michael smiled faintly. "Or something." "Or something?" Reed mocked. stepping closer. You think you're clever, don't you? Hiding behind that smug attitude. I could make this a lot worse for you, you know. Michael's smile faded, replaced by a steely resolve. You could try, officer, but you'd be making a bigger mistake than you already have. The ambiguity in his answer seemed to irritate Reed further. He stepped closer, invading Michael's personal space, his voice dropping to a near growl. Listen, you think you're smarter than me? Think you can talk your way out of this? Michael met his gaze evenly, unflinching. I don't think anything, officer. I just believe in fairness, and so far, I'm not seeing much of it here. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Reed took the bait. Fairness? You think fairness is what this is about? People like you always... He stopped himself abruptly, the words lingering like smoke, even though they hadn't fully escaped. Michael's expression didn't change, but something about his posture shifted, a subtle but unmistakable signal that he'd caught exactly what Reed had left unsaid. People like me? Michael repeated, his voice soft but charged with meaning. Reed bristled, stepping back as if realizing he'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. You know what I mean, he muttered, though his tone lacked the conviction it had moments earlier. I think I do, Michael replied quietly. His calmness wasn't passive anymore. It was razor-sharp, cutting through the pretense like a blade. And I think we both know this interaction stopped being about a traffic violation a long time ago. Reed opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. For the first time, he looked uncertain, like he wasn't entirely sure how to proceed. The balance of power was shifting, and for the first time, Reed was on shaky ground. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Reed said, his voice low and accusatory. Playing the victim, making me out to be the bad guy. But I know your type. You're not as innocent as you're pretending to be. Michael's eyes darkened, but his voice remained steady. If I'm pretending anything, officer, it's patience, because right now, you're testing every ounce of it. But the moment of reckoning was still to come, and it would be one he'd never forget. Michael's voice broke the heavy silence, steady and unyielding. Officer, I think it's time you know who I am. Reed's brows knitted, his irritation resurfacing. I don't care who you are, he shot back, though the faint crack in his tone suggested otherwise. Michael reached into his pocket, his movements slow and deliberate. I'm reaching for my badge, he said calmly, watching Reed's hand twitch near his holster. No need for theatrics, I want you to see it. A badge? Reed laughed, but it was forced, nervous. What, you, some kind of wannabe cop? Don't waste my time with fake credentials. Michael's gaze didn't falter. You'll want to see this, officer. It's going to change the rest of your day. The words hung in the air, weighted with something unspoken. Reed's eyes followed Michael's hand as he pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open, revealing a gleaming badge. Michael Hayes, Michael said, his tone as casual as if he were introducing himself to a neighbor. Chief Inspector, Seattle Ethics Commission. Reed froze. His eyes darted to the badge, then back to Michael's face, searching for some sign that this was a joke. But there was no humor in Michael's expression, only quiet authority and a hint of disappointment. Ethics Commission? Reed stammered, his bravado crumbling. You're kidding, right? Michael tilted his head, his voice cold. Do I look like I'm kidding, officer, or are you just realizing how deep you've dug yourself? Ethics Commission? Reed repeated, his voice cracking slightly. Yes, Michael interrupted, saving him the trouble of finishing the thought. I oversee officer conduct. My job is to ensure that the people wearing this badge uphold the integrity and values it's meant to represent. Reed's face paled, his confident demeanor unraveling in real time. He took a small step back, his hand falling away from his belt, as though the weight of his own authority had suddenly become too heavy. Michael took a step forward, closing the gap Reed had instinctively created. Do you know what the most troubling part of this interaction has been, Officer Reed? He asked, his voice calm but piercing. Reed didn't answer. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd walked into quicksand and had no idea how to escape. It's not the profiling, Michael continued, though that's bad enough. It's not the baseless escalation either. It's the fact that you've done all of this without even realizing who you were talking to. You assumed that I wouldn't know my rights, that I wouldn't understand the laws you're sworn to uphold. And why? Reed opened his mouth, but no words came. Michael's gaze bore into him, unrelenting. Because I didn't fit your idea of someone deserving respect, Michael finished for him. His words weren't angry, but they carried the weight of an indictment. And that's not just a problem for me, officer, that's a problem for everyone you encounter in this uniform. Reed's shoulders sagged slightly, the full weight of Michael's words landing squarely on him. He glanced down at the badge in Michael's hand again, as if it might somehow disappear if he didn't look too closely. Michael stepped back, giving Reed a moment to breathe, but his voice didn't lose its edge. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to take a step back, return my documents, and think very carefully about what you say next." Reed's lips parted, but he hesitated, clearly debating whether to push back or comply. "This isn't over," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "You can't just—" "Oh, it's over," Michael cut in, his tone final. "For now, at least. But don't worry, officer. You'll see me again, and it won't be on the side of the road." The hesitation cost him, and then Michael added, his voice lowering slightly, "You're going to hear from me again. Not as a driver you stopped on the side of the road, but as the man tasked with deciding whether you're fit to wear that badge." Reed swallowed hard, his face reddening as the weight of the moment sank in. He reached into his chest pocket and pulled out Michael's license and registration, his hands trembling slightly as he handed them over. Michael took them without a word, tucking them into his wallet. He stepped toward the driver's side door of his car, pausing with one hand on the handle. He looked over his shoulder, meeting Reed's gaze one last time. "Remember this, Officer Reed," Michael said. "The badge doesn't make you better than anyone. Makes you accountable to everyone." As Michael slid back into his car and started the engine, Reed was left standing in the fading light, his confidence shaken and his future uncertain. But for Michael, this was far from over. His next move would ripple through the entire department. The drive home was quiet, but Michael's mind was anything but. The encounter played over in his head, not because it was unique, but because it wasn't. Reed wasn't the first officer Michael had dealt with like this, and he knew he wouldn't be the last. But this time, things would be different. This time, Michael had the authority to act. The next morning, Michael sat at his desk, the early sunlight streaming through the blinds of his office at the Seattle Ethics Commission. A file sat open in front of him, Officer Daniel Reed. His record wasn't spotless. Minor complaints of unprofessional conduct, excessive stops, and vague misunderstandings that had never been properly addressed. Michael leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, as he thought about the broader implications. Reed wasn't an anomaly, he was a symptom of a deeper problem, and Michael wasn't interested in putting a bandage on a bullet wound. His phone buzzed and he glanced at the screen, a text from a colleague who'd heard whispers about last night's stop. "Heard you had a run-in with Reed, you okay?" Michael typed a quick reply, "I'm fine. Reed's the one who should be worried." A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant, Sarah, stepped in, holding a stack of reports. "Morning, Mr. Hayes. I've got the summary on last month's misconduct cases. Also, Commissioner Grant wanted me to remind you about the commission review next week." Michael nodded, taking the files from her. "Thanks, Sarah. Can you also schedule a meeting with Commissioner Grant for this afternoon? There's something I need to discuss with him." Sarah hesitated, sensing the weight in Michael's tone. "Of course," she said, before slipping out of the room. Michael turned his attention back to Reed's file, but his focus wasn't just on the officer. This was bigger than one man and one interaction. It was about the culture that allowed someone like Reed to feel justified in his behavior. And if there was one thing Michael knew, it was that culture started at the top. Later that afternoon, Michael sat across from Commissioner Grant in a conference room. Grant, a seasoned veteran with salt and pepper hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned back in his chair, listening intently as Michael recounted the traffic stop. "Reed was out of line from the start," Michael said, his voice steady but laced with frustration. "He wasn't just enforcing the law, he was looking for a fight. And I'm not the only one he's targeted." Grant's brow furrowed. "You're saying this is a pattern?" "I'm saying it's a culture," Michael replied. "And if we don't address it, we're complicit." "I could have written it off as just another bad interaction," Michael said, his voice steady but resolute. "But that would have been a mistake. Reed's behavior isn't an isolated incident. It's a reflection of how much work we still have to do." Grant rubbed his temples, exhaling slowly. "This isn't the first time Reed's name has come up," he admitted. "But we've always handled it internally, quietly." "And that's the problem," Michael replied. "Quiet doesn't fix anything. Quiet lets it keep happening. It's time to be loud." Grant looked at him, the weight of the conversation etched into his face. "What are you proposing?" "A commission-wide review," Michael said without hesitation. "Not just of individual officers, but of our training, our protocols, our accountability systems. We can't keep sweeping this under the rug. If we don't hold ourselves to a higher standard, how can we expect the community to trust us?" Grant leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "You're going to ruffle some feathers with this." "Good," Michael said simply. It's about time someone did. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, interviews, and reports. Michael worked tirelessly compiling data, speaking with officers, and holding public forums to hear directly from the community. The Reed incident became a catalyst for change, a turning point that forced the commission to confront its flaws head-on. Reed, for his part, faced an internal hearing. Michael made no secret of his involvement, sitting across from Reed during the proceedings and watching as the officer squirmed under the scrutiny. Reed tried to defend himself, claiming he was just doing his job, but Michael's detailed account of the stop left no room for excuses. The hearing resulted in a suspension, but Michael knew the real victory wasn't in punishing Reed, it was in preventing the next Reed. Months later, Michael stood at the podium of a community event, addressing a room full of officers, city officials, and local residents. He spoke not of blame, but of responsibility, of the shared duty to create a system that worked for everyone. His words weren't just a call for accountability, they were a promise of change. Justice isn't just about catching the bad guys, Michael said, his voice resonating through the hall. It's about making sure the people sworn to protect and serve do so with integrity, fairness, and respect for everyone they encounter. That's the badge I believe in, and that's the badge we're building here together. And the applause was thunderous, but Michael didn't linger on it. For him, this wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of a better one. As Michael stepped down from the podium, he glanced at the faces in the crowd, some skeptical, some hopeful, but all listening. He knew change wouldn't come overnight, but it would come. And for now, that was enough. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's start the conversations that matter, the ones that lead to change. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this, stories that challenge us, inspire us, and remind us of what we're capable of when we stand for what's right.